And welcome to the North East London Integrated Care Partnership meeting. Just checking that you know where you are. And it's a particularly important meeting because this is where we get to debate, discuss, amend and approve the interim integrated care strategy. And because it is our first formal meeting, it is a meeting that's in public. So I take this opportunity to welcome members of the public, staff who are joining and the press. And although we've not had any submitted questions from the public on this occasion, I hope they benefit from hearing and observing our conversations today. As stated, the outcome of the meeting is primarily focused on getting to a point where we can approve the interim integrated care strategy. The other key outcome is for us to better understand the content of the joint forward plan that the integrated care board has to produce, which will set out how we will organise our resources to deliver on the priorities that we agree in the actual integrated care strategy. There's lots of I's and C's and S's in that. So that you're aware, the meeting is being recorded. So I'm going to ask people to make sure they switch off their microphones when they're not contributing, and when they do speak for the very first time, to introduce who they are and where they're from, because introducing 25 people take me a bit of time. And as it's a meeting in public, the chat function is switched off, so to enable people to observe all of the conversation. I think that's quite important. So welcome. No apologies have been received apart from our rep from Tower Hamlets CVS on behalf of the volunteer. It was Peter O'Kaley. He's now been replaced by Vicky Scott, but she can't make this very first meeting. So just from Tower Hamlets, and Ian Buckmaster will need to leave us at 2 p.m. but we'll be here for the meter discussion, which is really important. Okay, so in terms of declaration of interest, unless anybody tells me otherwise, I'm not aware of any new interest other than those that we've gathered already and published on our website. No one's done anything new or exciting since I last met. That's fine. So I'll just move us straight onto the minutes. So the minutes of our last meeting and our first as a statutory body are attached. You recall this in the development meeting where we sort of clarified our role and purpose and how we're going to sort of steer this integrated care strategy work. So there aren't any formal actions for me to follow up, but I did make sure that the discussions were fed back to the integrated care board, and I know that Joe and Hilary have made sure that it's been incorporated into the integrated care strategy that you see before you. So I just wondered whether there were any items of accuracy on the minutes. No? Great. So we're happy to approve the minutes then? Do some nodding for me. Great, and thumbs up. Great, thank you. And as I said, there's no actions given that the last meeting was a decision-making meeting. So we're going to move straight into then the substantial agenda item, where we will be formally seeking your approval. And the strategy is interim because we're expecting some more national guidance in June, but actually more importantly for us, it's interim because we've got plans for the big conversation with our local people and communities particularly to inform the content of this strategy in our joint forward plan, but also I think the emphasis on the measures, how we will know that this has been a success, and that's going to happen in the spring. And once we've approved the strategy in this partnership, it will be presented to the IC board, Integrated Care Board, later this month. We'll be recording all the comments from today and ensure that the amendments are in place. But without further ado, although it's Joe and Hilary, they're probably going to talk us through. I didn't know if you wanted to start off with anything, Zena.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you very much, Marie. The only thing I really want to say by way of introduction is a really big thank you to everybody for their enthusiastic participation in the development of the strategy so far. A huge number of people across the system have made the time and effort to participate in workshops, to welcome Hilary and her team, mostly Hilary, to place-based partnerships, to health and wellbeing boards, taking the time to read the papers and give us comments on various different iterations of the strategy. And I am really confident that that puts us in a really good place with the strategy, which is not to say that people won't have comments today. I would really encourage people to come forward with their comments today. But it has felt like a really collaborative, system-wide process for developing the strategy. And I think that's really important in terms of setting us on a really firm foundation for the partnership going forwards, particularly because we know that's not necessarily the case everywhere in the country. So that, you know, that kind of sense of collaboration and that way of doing things, and I know that Hilary and Jo will talk a little bit about some of the things that are in the strategy about ways of working, I think is almost as important, probably as important as the content of the strategy. So a really big thank you to everybody for that. The second thing I just wanted to say briefly is Jo will talk later about the Joint Forward Plan, which is the document that takes the sort of NHS actions from the strategy and you know, kind of plans for the next 5 years on them. But I really hope that the strategy will also provide a basis for all the partners included in the Integrated Care Partnership to think through what their role in developing and taking forward the priorities that we've set out going forwards. So, for instance, you know, and I can see Councillor Kennedy on my screen, so I'll talk about local authorities, you know, kind of local authorities and their role in supporting people with long-term conditions in their housing, for instance, or through membership concessions at leisure centres or whatever it is. So, and I'm sure that those won't all appear in the metrics that we get to, but I'm hoping that we can really take a really broad partnership approach to the implementation of the strategy going forward. And with that, I will hand over to Jo and Hilary.
Thank you very much. And Jo and Hilary, can you let us know whether you want us to sort of raise our points as you go through the presentation or wait to the very end for the discussion? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to do the talking because Hilary, unfortunately, is not very well. She's here. She's able to contribute, but I was going to try and spare her voice a little bit. I'm really happy that people ask questions as we go through. And I suppose to that end, there were two things we were particularly seeking feedback on. So first of all, are there any important areas that are missing from our priorities or cross-cutting themes, and anything that we need to emphasise differently? So as I'm talking through, it'd be really helpful if colleagues can flag anything there. And secondly, have we set the right level of ambition and scope for our success measures, recognising this is an interim final draft. So just as I start talking through that they're the questions we've posed today, mindful that we are also asking for approval of this interim strategy. So I was just going to talk a little bit through, I suppose, where we've landed in this final version. So it is the final draft, and we will be coming back in June with the final version of this document and our final version of the Joint Forward Plan. So as well as the 4 priorities and 6 cross-cutting themes that we've previously talked through, we've now got a full draft that includes a section on the foundations of the well-functioning system. So that includes some elements of the new financial framework, our infrastructure, both digital and physical, as well as the priorities that we have for embedding equity across the whole system. Also an introduction that we've added, and in that we're setting out the current context that we're working in terms of the health inequalities that we're experiencing, and the impacts that we've all experienced from the pandemic, and the cost of living crisis on our population. We've also highlighted in that introduction some of the associated pressures that we're experiencing in our system, so including the high demand that we have for critical services, including the urgent and emergency care pathways, our planned care backlog, and the challenging economic macro environment that's impacting all of our public services, as well as the ongoing industrial action that we're all experiencing at the moment. It's worth just noting, and I will be talking in a different item later in the same meeting, but the Joint Forward Plan is going to have a focus on building on this strategy, but it will focus much more on the operational challenges and the sustainability of our services, as well as being really explicit about how we will deliver this strategy. It's worth also noting the 6 cross-cutting themes are the start of building our approach across the system to make sure that we are going to be tackling health inequalities, and that includes our focus on ethnicity and poverty and deprivation, as well as the priority groups, so people with learning disabilities and autism, people who are homeless and informal carers. Prevention, personalisation, co-production, a high trust environment, a learning system driven by research and innovation are the 6 really important cross-cutting themes that really talk about how we want to work together. Hilary has been very busy, not only in collating all of this, but she has been continuing the engagement and dialogue, attending all of the health and wellbeing boards. And I'm really delighted to say that the feedback and discussion that we've been engaging with in those forums, as well as the place-based partnerships, has been really positive. And we're looking forward to making sure that we continue that dialogue as we iterate this document and develop the joint forward plan, but most importantly, work together to deliver our ambitions. So in terms of the next steps, we utilised existing insight with the help from Health Watch colleagues and undertook engagement with local people and service users in some areas of developing this strategy. We do recognise there is more that we need to do to bring local people into the work, and so, as we've already alluded to, Charlotte is leading the planning for our big conversation with local people that will be starting in the spring, and we would very much envisage this strategy and the ambitions we set out in it being a really core part of that conversation. What we will be doing is taking any final feedback on this interim strategy from you today ahead of publishing this. So what we will be seeking to do is publish this document on our website as an interim version, which will be setting the direction of our current planning, both on the joint forward plan and the operating plan. And we do recognise there is more work we need to do to develop the success measures, particularly to make sure that they are smart metrics and to make sure that we can together track and report the impact that we're having in delivering those. And as we've said, what we'll plan to do is bring back final guidance, or we'll review against any final guidance that's published and bring it back for a final approval of the ultimate version in June. And the final thing I was just going to say was to reiterate my thanks to all of you and all of your colleagues, but also to Hilary for all of the work that she's undertaking in leading this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. Just because it is a public meeting, can you explain what the operating plan is? Because we've got an explanation of joint forward plan. We're going to talk about that, but probably not of the operating plan in our papers.
Sorry, yes. So the operating plan is really a detailed NHS document that talks about how we are at a granular level going to be delivering against all of the statutory requirements we have and all of the targets we need to meet in the next financial year.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Hands are up already. You can ask anything you want, but we also need to make sure there's no important areas missing and that it's setting the right level of ambition. So, Maureen, your hand was up first.
Thank you, Marie. I mean, again, iterating probably what everybody's going to say. I mean, and it is a really good plan. A strategy that is very clear about what our ambition is. But building on what Zena said, I actually think it's beholden on all of us to take this back to place again, and health and wellbeing boards, and to think about, I mean, your action plan would be far too big if you had our 7 on top, but what additional at the 7 places, what's the additional actions we're going to do locally that complement or help deliver this? And I think that, that should be sent to you, in terms of what we've done, sort of say quarterly, so that you can see those other bits that complement it. So I think that's beholden on us to do at the 7 places. But I think, without that, we've got that missing bit. I mean, as Zena said, sort of ticking off the concessions at leisure centre, and that's not something you could have in the main plan, but we can deliver on. So I take that on board, and I think we can, all of us sitting here, take that back. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's really brilliant, Maureen. And I think one of our next meetings, we're going to discuss what information would we need to actually help us understand as a partnership that we're moving forward on the priorities that we set. So how that local information becomes part of that without drowning us in it, I think will be part of our discussion. That's a really good contribution. Thanks, Maureen. Chris.
Thank you. Yes, it's absolutely in the right place. No, we're not missing anything vital. The one tiny change of emphasis, no, just a change of order in terms of the 4 priorities. In some iterations, and I think early on we talked about workforce first, and the opportunities for employment and for people in the future. And it feels to me that mental health, long-term conditions, and babies, children and young people, we can only do any of that without the workforce stuff. And when it was mentioned first, before the other 3, that made more sense to me from having it mentioned last. So that literally all I would do is suggest we think about changing the order we mention those in. Thanks.
It's quite interesting because I can see some nods and some shakes of head, and actually, you know, I can see how that's quite useful because straight away it's showing the wider breadth. So it's not just a, you know, sort of a kind of, you know, NHS folks saying employment in the wider sense, but also there's that life course thing. I'm going to be a bit cheeky because Jackie was one of the people shaking her head, and I just wondered if it'd be useful to see what the alternative view is, if you don't mind, Jackie.
It's interesting, Marie, because we've had exactly the same discussions in, sorry, I'm Jackie Smith, I'm the chair in common of Barts Health and BHRUT, and we've had exactly the same discussions in our developing our trust strategies. I of course agree that without our workforce and without our workforce, we can't deliver for our patients, and without the wider engagement on employment, we can't deliver on the health determinants that are going to help us to improve health and tackle inequalities across North East London more generally. However, I think we should put patients and their needs and their life journey first. Nevertheless, I think it sends a message about where our priorities are if we do that.
Brilliant. I just wondered, because and this is for Joe, whether or not there's a solution to this which actually leaves it in the way that it is, but actually brings out the importance of workforce in the introductory narrative, and how that's going to underpin our ability to do everything. I think sort of Chris kind of, yeah, okay. What do you think, Joe? Is that something we could do?
I think that's absolutely something we can do, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Neil.
Was it me, Marie? Did you say? Yep.
Yes, please, Neil.
Yeah, so I'm Councillor Neil Wilson, Cabinet Lead for Health and Adult Social Care, London Borough of Newham. Mine is a very specific one, as you might guess, Marie. It's there's no page numbers I can't see, but it's on the personalisation agenda. And again, I congratulate everybody on their contribution so far. I think it's a really good piece of work. But it was just what success looks like, and I'm just using this as an example, Marie, really. Last bullet point, personalisation. We will have at least one PCN in each place-based partnership with a CYP social prescribing service. Now, CYP in local authority terms is children and young people. Is that the reference there?
I don't know.
And if it isn't, what is it? If it is, why are we excluding adults and anybody who doesn't fit within the, because we're doing social prescribing across the piece using joy and various other things that we're bringing hopefully joy to the patients. Do you see where I'm going with this? Personalisation should be across the piece. We need to get primary care networks more involved, and it's a very important sort of development area. We're at very early stages in my borough, and I would suggest across most local authorities, but it's such an important topic, which is a very good integrated one, because I think the local authorities with their databases of particularly community outreach areas of community engagement that we've learnt from in the pandemic. So does anybody know an answer to my question on that one?
Hilary, the poorly Hilary has got her hand up. Hilary.
Yeah. So apologies. We've tried to eradicate acronyms wherever we can, but this CYP in this instance does refer to children and young people, and the reason that's pulled out specifically here is because the focus on social prescribing has been with adults, so this is extending that work to children as well. And page numbers are a brilliant idea.
Yeah,
great innovation. That would be. Thank you.
I come back, Marie? So I don't want to dominate this thing about social prescribing, but it implies that we've got it all in hand in the adults arena, and I don't think we have. So there's a lot of developmental work. So can we phrase it so that it's not sort of implying that we're all, up to speed, all of us? I think it's variable.
That's really helpful, and I will make. And I
you see where I'm going. If we can phrase it so that it's not exclusive but inclusive, or whatever the phrase is, of both different age groups and all the rest of it. Yeah.
But we'll make that a lot clearer. Thank you.
And shall I come back after others have contributed? Because you know me, Marie. I don't want to dominate.
No, carry on, Neil. Then I'll bring in Councillor Ford then. So.
Okay. Right, so the other one was on what success measures looks like in general. I just think they were aspirational rather than more detailed, and I don't know quite. It's always difficult, isn't it? We wanted appendix numbers, 1 to 15 or something, with a whole lot of data sets. This is not the purpose of this document. It's got to go through a whole load of machinations and consultations before June. But I just wondered whether there was any point of just doing a few exemplars of some particular data sets that would be illustrative of what success looks like. Just to throw it out to the group, without it becoming war and peace, like we've tried to avoid right from the start, haven't we? On the steering group, we said, Marie, we didn't want it to have 60 appendices or something with a load of data sets that people can reference in other documents.
That's a good point. And Hilary, save your voice because Joe's hand's up. Over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I was just going to say, I absolutely agree. We are intending to develop smart objectives, so we will come back with that next level of detail. So completely take what you're saying on board. We do need to be explicit and have measurable things we can all hold each other to account on.
Yep. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Gillian Ford, London Borough of Havering, Cabinet Lead for Adults and Health and Deputy Leader of the Council. Okay, so yes, I concur with Maureen about oversight by local place-based partnerships. I think that would be a very healthy way to go. And in relation to Neil's comment on the detail on what success looks like, I think there needs to be an independent piece of work which could incorporate case studies. So that would then be something that could be shared across the piece, and we will have those case studies to hand as models and exemplars. My point I wanted to raise was on quality. Now, I have found the word quality on one page, and it's, again, apologies, there's no page numbers, but it's under a relentless focus on equity, and it's the fifth bullet. God damn, my words are muddled up today. Fifth bullet point down, quality improvement. But we have no mention of quality within any of the models that we're looking at. And I think that should be a focus as well. It's all well and good delivering a service, but we need to demonstrate that we are concerned on quality as much as we are in delivering a service.
I'm smiling actually because that was one of my points, Gillian, that we needed to emphasise quality, quality improvement, yes, but improving access, experience and outcomes is about service quality. So I'm just endorsing. So thank you for that contribution. Hilary's got her hand up there. Hilary.
Yeah, that is a fair point. I think I mean, there isn't an awful lot on anything in this, because we tried to sort of keep it brief and as a summary, really. But the other place that you'll find a little bit of narrative, but accepting we probably need a bit more, is in relation to the learning system, which is about how we work differently as a system, drawing on research and innovation, but with quality improvement as our sort of change methodology. But except we probably need to sort of build on that a bit more for later versions.
Thank you. And I think if we could just think about the narrative, perhaps in this one, and actually emphasise quality and the fact that it will be further expanded in the final document, I think that would be really helpful, if that's okay. I can see Hilary nodding, so that's good. Eileen.
Happy New Year, all. Eileen Taylor, Joint Chair of ELFT and NELFT. On the point of success measures, I was actually encouraged by these sections on here. I know how difficult it is to come up with success measures, because it's something that we've been trying to do for a couple of years now, and some of these on here are really quite spot on. So I think we're looking forward to working with the ICS on developing these measures, because the more aligned we can keep them across all of the participants in the ICS, the easier it will be for us to see how well we're actually performing. But you know, there are some things on here that we haven't thought of, which is great. And maybe there's some things that we're working on at our two trusts that we could add to this. So I think it's a great start. I think the strategy is great. And our teams feel that they were consulted and that their input was taken on board. So thank you.
Thank you, Eileen. That's another really good point about how we make this a system approach, and about how, you know, we can try and align the measures and be involved in the development of those measures. I've got Matthew.
Hi there, yeah, Matthew from Health Watch Tower Hamlets. Just really going back to Councillor Wilson's queries about the pages. Unless I'm really lucky, the electronic version has page numbers on it, and the slide that he was relating to was page 24. Just what I'll say, if that will help in any way.
Can I just come in there? They're very, very small, Neil. I've just found them myself. They're within the colour thing. If you go about an inch up, if you've got it on your screen, it's tiny numbers. I've just seen them.
They're page numbers for the pack as well, rather than the strategy document, but we will turn it into something more readable. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Matthew. I haven't got any other hands up, so I just wanted to pick up some of my own points.
Yes, you have. John.
John, oh, sorry, John, over to you.
Yeah, well, I thought this was really good, much better than I thought it was going to be when we set out, I'm afraid. So very well done to Zena and her team, because it's a lot more specific.
And the steering group, John, I'm just going to throw that in, you know.
Oh, yeah, and of course
some of us have
steering.
been working on this a bit. So, you know, just I want to give credit to everybody.
No, I certainly want, obviously, yeah, absolutely. The sort of two things that, two comments really, which I guess may come out more in the next stage of the joint plan. I was pleased to see where we begin our story, because that was a way of, if you like, most of the strategies about the things we want to improve, but there are a whole lot of business as usual things which we want to maintain, or, you know, and improve if we can. And it seems to me quite likely that over the coming year, some of those, if you like, constants, which we haven't given a lot of attention to here, may become more urgent and be more dominating of our life. So I think, especially when we get to the next stage down, we need to give due weight to those. Otherwise, quite a lot of our staff will think, yeah, well, that's all very nice, but doesn't really seem to relate to what I'm doing and what we're having to do. And I also think sort of general comment I got from one of my non-executive directors was that it was splendidly ambitious on the goals and outcomes, but didn't, when it came to the how, it didn't actually spell out very big changes in how we're approaching things. And so it talks about a radical new approach, but the not quite clear how radical it's going to be. Again, I suspect we're going to be forced to make some significant changes in how we're working at present by immediate pressures. So it may be worth getting that in. Finally, just one point on place. At some point it says, well, places will take care of primary prevention, which I take to be, sort of air quality, transport, housing, employment, those sorts of health and well-being board issues. But actually, I think the place partnership, certainly the one that we're building in City and Hackney, is also very engaged in shaping secondary and tertiary prevention. So I don't want to lose that element. Because, well, obviously because social care is a key element of actual delivery of care and health services, and they're run by the local authority and they need to be brought into the partnership picture.
Thank you very much, and for the public who are attending, and for people who don't know him, which won't, who are in the health and care, that John Gee's the chair of the Homerton. So thank you very much, John. Three very important points. Joe, did you want to come back on those 3 points? One is about the importance of the present and relevance to staff, and I should think the public as well. And the how of it, and the importance of secondary and tertiary prevention as well as primary prevention. Over to you.
Thank you. I'll do the first two, but I might ask Hilary if she's able to, with her voice, to come in on the one around prevention. So yeah, absolutely agree with you, and I think we probably will pick up those issues around the kind of immediacy of those operational issues. I think if you've got any comments about how we build on that further in the introduction, where we have tried to make reference to it in the strategy, but I think the joint forward plan is really where we start to in detail address those points. I've had a complete mind blank. Sorry, what was the second point? You're muted, Marie, sorry.
So it was
the how. It was the how. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Can I suggest what we'll do is we'll go back and review what we've said at this stage in the strategy. But again, I think that is something that we will want to iterate and build. And so it may be something that we could more appropriately come back to in the final version in June, where we've had time to work through and build out a little bit more the sort of specificity around that. I'd rather that we did that in an engaging and collaborative way rather than us sort of just updating that. But we will go back and have a look at what we've drafted and see whether we can build that out further. Hilary, are you able to come in on the secondary and tertiary prevention point?
Yeah, I mean, just on the sort of how. I mean, I think if we really do focus, how we work together on these 6 areas, pay, huge greater attention to prevention across our whole system, we really do, to start delivering much more holistic, personalised care. We really get serious about co-production. I think those are the kind of, that would be radical actually for us as a system if we really put those things, tackling health inequalities front and centre of how we work. But I think what we found was that in coming together in the workshops, we are a bit stuck in how we've always done things, and I think we're on a journey and we need to challenge ourselves and continue to challenge ourselves. And I think one of the good things about having a really broad partnership is actually there's a lot of learning from different parts of the system, and we've seen a lot of that challenge happen, in some of the discussions about why are you only focusing here when you could be doing not just prevention but health creation, just for one example. So I think I don't think we've got all of the ideas set out yet, but I think we've started to see some really great seeds, and I think and that's really I think that's really positive. Yes, I agree about the prevention point.
Sorry, and the prevention point was that in the document it talks about place being where primary prevention would take place, and John's point was that actually at place-based partnerships they're also looking at secondary and tertiary prevention as part of that prevention work that they're doing.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I'll just look at the wording again, because I mean we recognise that it's not, you know, within places there's a lot of work around anchor institutions, you know, and that's so it's not that it's happening in one place and not the other, but I think that's just about looking at the wording, how we've worded things. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Hilary. Neil.
Thank you. I found a page number, you'll be pleased to know. Page 32, long-term conditions, something that we're a bit of, you know, focused on with an ageing well strategy in my own borough. I just don't think we've still got enough in there regarding the, and I think I did allude to it at one meeting before, Marie, about the links with adult social care. Yeah, in terms of not just the prevention stuff that we're well versed on in this discussion. I know about, you know, prevention of falls and frailty. You know, that some of that is going on quite well in terms of partnership working. But I just thought we could have a bit more in there about the place of social care in that piece. I don't know how we can weave it in without it being, again, wordy and just, you know, a sort of aspirational thing. But there is some good stuff. It ties up with, I think, Gillian's point earlier on that, you know, behind this, and obviously this is the first, you know, interim draft, you know, with some, you know, independent from this document, but clearly related to in terms of case studies. Because I'm sure in a lot of the local authorities, adult social care is grappling, but also having some success with its adult social care in terms of looking after an increasingly complex and multiple long-term conditions part of the population. Does it make sense where I'm going with that, without it having to sort of have another 6 pages on it somehow, just cross-reference?
I can see Hilary nodding, so that's a yes.
Is that a yes, Hilary? Am I making sense where I'm going with this? Sorry.
No, absolutely. I'm taking copious notes of all the points that people are making, and we will go through it and just make sure that, because I think even if they're small references, they're important because they, you know, they lead to bigger pieces of work and connections that people really want to see. So we'll make sure that all of those are in there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. And I've double checked and there's no hands up at the moment. So there's only a couple of points from me. So we've talked in the introduction about where we are now, and we talked about cost of living crisis. But I think one of the conversations from one of our Population Health and Integration Committee was actually it's more than cost of living. There's poverty, you know, cost of living is making it worse, but poverty existed before and it's going to continue. So I think there's something about that I just wanted to pick up. The other thing, which is just like a wording thing really, is we say that 53% is Black, Asian and mixed ethnicity. And I thought it was minority ethnic. So the 53% incorporated, for example, you know, sort of Eastern European Jewish communities that we have. So just I didn't look at the page number, so apologies for that, but you'll see where it is. And then the final thing is that we spent quite a lot of time over a year ago as a partnership of people developing some design principles, which I don't see here. I see they're sort of connected in other ways. We did the ambition, we did design principles, we did the 4 priorities. And I just wondered with the design principles, they're quite important to that high trust environment. So whether or not we can link them in there or somewhere else, I think is important because people know them and there's a lot of conversation about them at that time. You know, things like creating value and so on. But you know, I just want to thank you and the team and everyone that's been involved because I think it is a really good document. And just to say, the part of the how is also the joint forward plan, which we're discussing, which is the NHS bit of it, but which we're discussing next as well. That goes into some of the detail about how we'll meet that. So there's no other questions. Oops, Diane.
Oh, sorry, I was trigger happy.
No, it's fine. Did you want to contribute? No. Okay.
You're on mute again, Marie.
Thank you. See, it wasn't in one of my resolutions, Maureen. So, what we've agreed that we are going to look at, sort of probably as a next step bit about what we're going to do next, is think about emphasising how it would be part of our all partners plans, the drive all partners plans. That we agreed that we're going to emphasise the importance of workforce in the narrative to delivering, but we retain the 4 priorities in the way that they are. That we are also going to, sorry, I'm turning my piece of paper. I can't find. Sorry, we're also going to be, I can't read my writing, I'm really sorry. We're also going to think about personalisation and how that's for adults as well as children, and think about what success looks like. And just to add something, I think that what success looks like, we also need to think about actual integration, because it's an integration strategy. And I remember my very first board report to the board, Healthwatch told me that integration has to be defined by local people. So I think that's really important. We also talked about sort of local place-based partnerships and their role in terms of prevention, but also the implementation of the strategy, and how those different elements of the strategy have to be reflected in our own plans, including the success measures. So let's make sure we continue the conversation about those success measures. And Gillian quite rightly emphasised quality, that it needs to be pulled out much more than we have currently. And then the long-term conditions piece and the importance of social care in that. In fact, social care, I think, runs through other elements as well, in terms of, for example, babies, children, young people, and the employment elements as well. And John rightly talked about, yes, we have to have the part about, you know, what it looks like now. So this means it's meaningful for our staff and our local people, but also if we have a little bit on the how, I think as an additional slide, I think that would be really, really great at the end. So how we're going to do this, I think would be really great, because I think that's an important point. And I think I did pick up the prevention point being at place and secondary and tertiary. So and we're going to come back as well with the success measures and more detail on the how as well at our next as we develop the document for June. With those amendments and tweaks, really, rather than amendments, is the meeting happy to and content to approve the strategy? There's right, so there's a yeah, brilliant. Oh, people are raising their hands. Great. Is anybody not contented? That might be an easier way, because I keep lots of nods.
There's a couple of hands up, Marie.
Brilliant. Okay. Let me just have a look.
Your hand is up. Tony's hand is up as a starter.
All right. Well, I need to put my hand down, but for some reason my machine's not allowing me to put my hand. Oh, it has now. Tony. Tony, your hand is up. Is that just that's agreement? I think that was people saying their agreement.
You're on mute.
Tony, did you want to contribute?
Marie, I think there's an issue with Tony's headphones and speakers, so we can't hear him. Fortunately, Tony, you can't put it in the chat either. Maybe if you email me or someone, I could say it in the meeting. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as approval, but because Tony can't communicate with us, when you get the email, even if we go on to the next item, you can bring it back so we can make sure his amendments are incorporated, and they'll be incorporated in my report to the Integrated Care Board, which is receiving the document at the strategy at its next meeting as well. Thank you. Okay, so Jo, I believe we still got you because you're going to take us through the joint forward plan.
Yes, sorry, it's a lot of talking from me today. So yes, I just wanted to talk through and explain the joint forward plan and in terms of what it is, our proposed approach and what we need to deliver by when. So the joint forward plan is another document that we are obligated to produce, and really I think the way that we need to be viewing this document as a partnership is the strategic delivery document that works hand in glove with the strategy that we've just approved. In terms of timeframes, we are expected to submit a draft of this document into NHSE by the end of March, but in the same way that we have until the end of June to submit a final version, we will have the same sort of leeway with the joint forward plan as well. So we'll have a first draft for approval at the end of March, a final submission in June. And the guidance that we've had shared with us just before Christmas has been really helpful, I think, in setting out and clarifying what's expected to be contained within the document. But quite excitingly, well, certainly for those of us who work in the NHS, there is no template for this document, which is quite unusual. Normally, when we have to submit an operating plan, there's a really onerous set of templates we have to fill out. So we have quite a lot of freedom to shape this document in a way that is meaningful to us as a partnership. And having said that, there are some things that we are absolutely obligated to make sure that we include in that. And sort of leap down to that sort of slide in the briefing document that was shared. There are really 3 different component parts that we absolutely must cover in the joint forward plan. One of those is speaking to the NHS universal commitments. There will be an element of this document that will inevitably, I'm afraid, feel quite NHS heavy. And in addition to that, we will also need to speak to and be really clear about the 4 core purposes of us as a system. And we need to make sure that we are explicit and clear in speaking to those. And there's also a whole series of legislative requirements that we also have to address and speak to in the document. So what we are proposing at the moment to do in terms of our approach to this is very much build on the back of the strategy that we have. So we don't intend to have much dialogue at all about the ambitions, because we have set and agreed those in the strategy. What we will want to do at the beginning of this joint forward plan is frame our collective understanding of the current status. So where are we at the moment in terms of the services that we're providing? And in particular, as we look ahead over a 5-year horizon, what do we anticipate happening if we don't take any action? So looking ahead, what do we anticipate the demand on our acute mental health community services, primary care services, and local authority services? What will that look like if we take no action? And then really for me, the most important part of this document will be the latter half, which is what are we therefore going to do and how are we going to do it? And that really is where we will come to the explicit plans around how we are going to implement and deliver the strategy that we've just agreed. So we will be working really closely with all of colleagues across the system. We'll be coming back out to place-based partnerships. We'll be working really closely with collaboratives to make sure that those are the plans that are represented and reflected in this document. The final thing I just wanted to talk to was the obligation and requirements for us to engage, which I think, again, really healthily and encouragingly, and sort of a step change from previous NHS planning guidance, there is a really strong and heavy emphasis for us on our engagement required to develop and finalise this joint forward plan. Now, I think we are starting in a really strong place from all of the engagement that we've done today on the strategy. We had a really helpful conversation in a previous meeting about also making sure that we are working with providers' membership councils and other existing fora that we can go to and engage with. But again, I think it's worth just asking the open question. I'd be keen to hear any feedback from colleagues today and any particular expectations you have around engagement on this, and any advice and steering you would give us, either in terms of the content of the document or the way in which you feel we need to go about engaging the construction and the completion of the document. That's all I was going to say, but really happy to take any questions or comments about the Joint Forward Plan and our approach to compiling it.
Thank you, Jo. Maureen.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Jo. And I suppose, as you acknowledge, and in the paperwork, it is very, very NHS heavy. And I'm not quite sure how you're going to reflect that the partners. But when you talk about partnerships in here, you talk about the trusts. You know, so you've got to broaden it out, and you know, it's not just words. I mean, when, for example, duty is around climate change. Do you know, we've got, as local authorities, far more duties and far more powers to deal with climate change, but we don't even get a mention in there. You talk about meeting the NHS net zero. I'm not quite sure how we do it and how we don't make a whole business out of it, but you know, as I always say to Marie, the clue's in the word integrated, and your forward plan must reflect what some of the partners can help you deliver on in North East London, and I'm not sure we're there yet in this iteration. So it's not just about ticking off the NHS forward plan matrix. It's about how do we incorporate others, and there's nothing in here about the voluntary and third sector at all. So I'm not, again, that's a huge challenge. I'm aware of that, but we have to acknowledge that we're not all here to help you deliver your plan. We're here to help deliver jointly for the residents across North East London. I don't mean to be negative, but
no, thank you, Maureen. And it's really hard because this is the plan that how we'll coordinate NHS resources. So, and we've got very strong national guidance in, you know, what needs to be done in, you know, in each one. But Jo, I'm going to move to you to respond.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really helpful challenge, actually. And I suppose what we've pulled together in this pack, and I think what you're referring to is where we've tried to list out the requirements and where we think we've already addressed them. I think what we've done is a really quick desktop exercise of where do we think we've already got stuff. And you're absolutely right to call out. We have been lazy and we have just referred to the stuff that we can easily get to because it's the NHS stuff. And I suppose the challenge is when we come back with later iterations, this should fundamentally look different. So thank you for calling it out. Thank you for naming it. Yeah, it's a really fair challenge. And I'm keen that the Joint Forward Plan, in the same way that the strategy is something we collectively own and recognise, that the Joint Forward Plan is similar. Otherwise, I'm not sure how we can have a separate delivery plan that we don't collectively own. So thank you. Take that absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a really fair challenge.
Charlotte, did you want to respond to that point as well? Have you got a new one?
Yeah, it was linked. It was the principles that are set out in the document, which I think do reflect that broader sort of system points that you're reflecting, Councillor Warby. I just wondered if we could just make sure that we agree those and really use those to underpin the next steps. So whatever the guidance might say, if we're looking at those principles, they do really reflect that system working, the local authorities, wider stakeholders, as you're saying, subsidiarity is introduced there. So I just think maybe coming back to that and making sure that we don't lose sight of those three principles would be really helpful.
Brilliant, thank you. It's a good solution, Charlotte. Chris.
I just wanted to build on what Maureen was saying. I think at the local level, I think you could and should be able to refer to where integration is already working well and talk about discharge teams and integrated learning disability teams, where there's already work going on at a very good level that's properly integrated. Perhaps you want to avoid perhaps talking about any one individual place, but I'm sure it's not just City and Hackney where we have a good discharge relationship. That must be replicated across the, to a certain extent, across the piece. So what I see from my end is that some of what Maureen talked about is already happening, and we can talk about without not saying it's a goal, but saying we're already doing it, and it's a very good platform there to build on.
That's an excellent point, Chris. Thank you. Gillian.
Thank you very much. Just coming in on elaborating on Chris's comments there, I think we do need to start moving away from separation of who's who. Yes, we can have in covering pages of who the partners are, but I think it then just needs to move on to integrated partners or integrated partnership, end of. So we are not narrowing it down to specifics. If there is one that is taking a lead, then yes, you use that specific. But I think in general, we need to start moving away from that. It's a partnership. Let's call it that, and let's move on from that. The other thing I was going to ask was, in the development of these reports, I just wondered, is there local authority representation when you're formulating this forward plan? Because I think that's a good starting point when you are developing something, that you have, be it a political or local authority representative, to be able to sort of guide and take you on that journey, so that it is developed collectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. I think part of these conversations are actually making sure we have that input as well. But I know there's other things that happen. I'm going to take a breather then, and then come back to Neil and John. But Joe, just wanted to see whether, sort of being able to highlight best practice, and Julian's point about, let's be talking about integrated partners and partnerships, and actually how are we ensuring local government in co-production of this, I suppose, as well as other partners. Over to you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. So I think absolutely, where we can talk about the good work that is happening, we definitely want to do that. I think we do need to also be pragmatic about the scale and size of this document. I'm really keen that this is something that's meaningful and useful for all of us. So I absolutely think we should talk about the good stuff as well as the stuff that's challenging, but we'll have to be mindful about how dense and lengthy that makes any document. Absolutely agree about the partnerships and the individual organisations. It will be important that we spell that out, but I think you're right, going forward we need to be really clear about the language of partnership. And great point about local authority representation. We are yet actually to have our first meeting, so I will take that on board. I'll go back and make sure that we do have someone from the local authorities around the table, just to help us as we shape the document. I think that's really helpful. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm not sure who was first, whether it was John or Neil who put their hands up, but I'm going to go with, I think it was Neil. So Neil, over to you.
Yeah, in relation to this point from Gillian about the local authority, both officer but also member, are we not, you said you hadn't had anybody so far at joint forward plan. Are we saying we're going to just take somebody from one of the authorities, or is it going to come from this steering group that we look at this, Marie? I was uncertain of process where we're going. I got the strategy one. Yep. We still having a steering group to look at this bit as well. I assumed we were, you see. But
yeah, the steering group is going to continue, and we'll be able to input, because it meets, it'll be meeting in between our meetings. And in fact, that reminds me, as an action, we need to make sure we bring back the steering group terms of reference for the partnership to agree, actually. But yes, it will come through the steering group and then be presented back again to the partnership, so we're able to form it. Zena's just put her hand up because I might have said something wrong. Zena?
No, not wrong at all, Marie. I was just going to add, so the steering group, absolutely, we would anticipate having, doing for the joint forward plan what it's done for the strategy. I think what Joe's reflecting, or certainly what we need is then at the sort of slightly more working or executive level, the right groups of people coming together to talk about the joint forward plan. And we probably just need to sort ourselves out on whether or not it's most useful to have a Section 151 officer or Director of Public Health or a DAS or kind of, a couple of those people, so we can go away and reflect on that.
Just in terms of legislative frameworks, possibly new to not yourself, Zena, because of your background, but others on the call. And, it's a two-way street. I'm not saying this is, that everybody in local government knows all about the legislative frameworks or the guidance notes from the Department of Health. But are we cross-referencing to take on Maureen's point, for instance, about our duties under, you know, air quality, for instance? Yeah. And just while I'm on air quality, Marie, earlier on we talked about air quality. Air quality is by definition across northeast London. You know, so we may have place-based approaches to air quality, but the wind does move it around. So air quality, you know, I speak as a geographer, I'm being as basic as I can be to people. That, you know, it's not boundary based. Do you see where I'm going? It's some things like, and can I just take on what Chris said? We've got some really good examples, and I'm sure it's across most of the local authorities in terms of discharge hubs and how we've worked very closely together, but also on learning disability services with partners like ELFT, etc., within local authorities. So it's about, as Gillian says, getting the language of integration right from the start, but also making certain we've got all the legislative levers possible that we can actually make this integration work. Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you. I think there's things there about, actually, I was just thinking about where this goes to, and actually we do have the local authority meeting where we can bring the joint forward plan to. I think we already discussed it there. The Health Watch collaborative come together there, as well as the voluntary sector. So there are opportunities for us to have some specific perspectives on this from our partner organisations, as well as coming to meetings where we have a representation of different partners in the room. So I think that's really important. I'm just going to bring in John before I come back to you, Joe, and actually, if that's okay, John.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a question which perhaps Jo can answer about how many numbers she thinks are going to appear in this plan. It's jolly difficult, I think, to sort of put forward financial numbers and so on for 5 years, especially we haven't even got a final budget, I suspect, for the current year. But anyway, so I'd be interested in, you know, how much is this going to be a set of aspirations over 5 years with some measures of success, and how far is it going to be a plan? A couple of comments. I mean, clearly the NHS Centre, in requiring this, had in mind the need to sort of corral the provider trust. So this is all about making sure that the different providers bloody well do cooperate and collaborate. I think that's how NHS will have seen it. And of course, we're delighted to do that. And so we're all in favour of that. But I do think with others that in setting out how we're going to tackle the health challenges of the next 5 years, an absolutely key part of that is the better provision of integrated services in the community across the whole region to take the pressure off the acute sector and to prevent, to put it a different way, the acute sector sucking all the resources in to its area of concern. And that is, to my mind, very much about place-based partnerships and joint, you know, better integration between social care, primary care, and acute and community services in place. And so I absolutely see why a lot of this is about how we're going to get our partners, namely the providers, to sort of row in behind the collective plan. But I think part of the plan has to be to shift into better developed community support for people at home across the patch, and that's got to be a wider partnership in goal and strategy.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand back. I mean, I think these are really good questions, actually. Back to you, Joe. I think we've answered the point on, you know, sort of local authority input and actually input of other partners. But Neil also made a point about actually there are responsibilities by individual partners that we need to make sure are reflected within this and refer to air quality, but also emphasise, yes, the good practice that we've got and brought in learning disabilities too. But John's point is, how are we going to be able to have the numbers and actually the importance of transformation at play? So because it's not just the providers, whilst understanding why we've got that emphasis given the national guidance. Over to you.
Thanks. So I think on the first point around the obligations that other partners have, I think again it's up to us to some extent how much we want to refer to that in this document. To give an example, the way I would see this working, we have collectively agreed that prevention is one of our priorities. So I would expect within this delivery plan, we need to be talking about what are we going to do to deliver on that priority and how are we going to do it. And to my mind, that's something that we would all recognise our input, and we will all need to have a role in delivering against that. So I think we probably just need to work through some of the detail to really understand what this is going to look like, but that to some extent may, I hope, to address some of these really valid questions around we all need to be able to see in it how we are contributing to the delivery of the plan. And on the numbers, it's a good question. So I suppose my answer to that is this is meant to be a 5-year plan with a particular focus on the first year, because we will be expected to update this on an annualised basis. So we know that we are already having to complete an operating plan, and that's going to be looking at numbers for the next 2 years. So certainly we will cut and paste and use the same numbers for the next 2 years. I think we will collectively want to take a view about whether we then project to the end of the 5-year planning horizon, or whether for now we just use the numbers for the next 2 years. But I think it's worth just reiterating it's a 5-year plan, but we will be expected to update it and refresh it on an annual basis. And I think therefore there will be some trade-offs or choices we'll want to be making about how much granularity do we put in this year's plan versus the conversation I expect next year, where we would want to have an awful lot more detail perhaps in terms of the level of detail.
Brilliant. Thank you very, very much. I can't see any other hands up, so what we'll make sure that comments are minuted, and I'll incorporate them in my chair to the Integrated Care Board, which is now also going to be discussing the joint forward plan that is meeting later this month. So you can see why we put dates in where we put them in, so the partnership can continue to influence the ICB in real time, the actual board in real time. I just wanted to take us back to the interim integrated care strategy, because Tony has sent an email through to Marie, so I'm going to be turning because he's having some challenges. So he wanted to add that the strategy needs to make reference to the need for greater equity amongst the partners. So, for example, one of the cost-cutting themes is around cross-cutting themes is around co-production. Another is around high-trust environment, and we need to engage communities due to a lack of trust, which is acknowledging the strategy, and to reach and engage with underserved and marginalised communities. And the voluntary and community sector will be key to that, and therefore equity about how that sector is factored into this strategy and actually helps deliver that strategy is critical. So there will play a crucial role that will need to be considered in resource allocation, as well as, I think, so it's not just the money but also the way we think about things. So I would like to incorporate that amendment into the integrated care strategy, that we put in something there about an equity amongst partners when we're thinking about the solutions and the development of that and the implementation of that strategy. Is that okay, Joe? I think Hillary's gone because she's too poorly, but is that okay, Joe?
Absolutely, yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Tony. Thank you.
So got that in there for Tony. We're doing really well because we've done our 2 substantial agenda items. I know we've all been discussing the interim care strategy and all sorts of fora beforehand, so we're coming to the end of the meeting now. There were no questions from the public, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, so we haven't got any of those. So I'm just asking, are there any items of any other business? No. Well, this means that you're getting. Oh, John, go ahead, John.
Yeah, sorry, don't want to delay people too much, but we do seem to be at a very critical time in the NHS, and everyone is talking about system breakdown. I'm not sure the system is breaking down, but it's certainly struggling. You know, today we're focusing on the sunlit uplands when we've overcome that and we're addressing inequalities much better than we have before. But I think at some point in these meetings we should probably have a chance for Zena perhaps to sort of set out what the state of play is and what the critical issues are across North East London. Otherwise we could get I'm not asking for that now, but I mean, I think otherwise you get a slight sort of division between what we're talking about and what our staff are actually struggling with right now. So in a forward meeting, perhaps you could think of that.
Really great suggestion, and I see Zena nodding her head already. And I think, yeah, no, because although we're planning for tomorrow, we have to sort out today too. So thank you, Neil.
Yeah, in the interest of transparency, and I might be lobbing a great big cannonball into the arena under AOB, but some of us are being summoned to budget working parties, etc. this week, and we've still not had yet again any indication on public health grant. It was even worse during a pandemic. You know, it's quite ironic that public health grant was not allocated till I don't know when in the financial year, but I just wondered, is there a place for us to share, not necessarily pounds and pence budget line discussion, but it links, I think, with John about the overall pressures that the system is facing, either at local government funding level for adult social care following the December settlement. It was only on December the 20th or whatever it was, and the budgets within the NHS.
I think that's a good point in terms of, you know, whether that resources beyond our critical issues, but Zena's got a hand up, so I'm going to move.
I know it's more of an ICB issue in terms of resourcing structures, but whether we have a view on it, as it were, as an integrated care partnership.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marie. Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I mean, I think it's a really important point, and I think it is part of the same point that John's making. I mean, I guess my observation is from going from being a local authority chief executive to being a chief executive within the NHS is that the kind of key issues or the key window through which local government experiences and kind of talks about the pressure is the financial window, and the key experience or kind of window through which NHS colleagues experience some of the same pressures is sort of demand and system pressures. So I do think it's two sides of the same coin. We've had some really helpful presentations from local authority colleagues, actually at London level as well, but also in our integrated care board development sessions, and also in our executive management team, so that we kind of have a better shared collective understanding. I think we could broaden that out to hear from kind of community people representing the community as well, what that third angle is, and I'm really happy to organise that for the next meeting. That's helpful.
Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, John and Neil. Okay, I can't see any other hands up, so I now move to close the meeting. Our next date will be agreed. We're going to sort of come together as a steering group and just think about what the agenda should be next and when we should get together. I just wanted to thank the team once again and give my best wishes to Hilary for a swifter recovery.